Is it hard for you to talk about your sexual wants, needs, and desires? Well, you're not alone. It's hard for everybody, and that's no pun intended. Are you hard right now and can't talk about it? Well, if so, this podcast is for you. Hi, I'm Toby. I'm from the band Emery. I've also led a bunch of men's groups with the True Man Experience, and I'm working on this podcast with Dr. Stormy, who is an amazing sex coach who has helped so many people, and that's what we're here to do. We were here to open up the conversation. You need to be able to talk about your sexual desires, your wants, and yes, even your needs, and where you can take your sex life with your partner. So sit back, relax. We're taking listener questions. We're going to have a great episode. Join us because this is the sex education you always wish you would have gotten.
Oh, this one's a doozy.
Yep. Let's get into it.
You're going to be surprised by what you learned.
All right.
Toby.
We might should just leave this in. The podcast might have already started, right? Because this episode is called "Men Need Sex," and I just want to say, it feels that way a lot. As a man, it feels like need is the right word when it comes to sex. But we're going to learn a lot on this episode. I'm glad that you're here, Stormy, to explain all this. This is the Sex 101 podcast. And we're happy to have you here. This one's interesting because once again, I think there's a lot of mythology around it. Like we talk about that, like sexual mythology, how these things happen. It's all, on our last episode, it was foreplay is for the woman or the female, like it's all, that's just not true. And so I'm excited to learn about what do men need sex?
So I love this, right? Me as a woman and you as a man, this is perfect. But so really the title of the podcast was really just to grab your attention, a little bit of a thirst trap, right? So, but also you mentioned there about the wives' tales or the myths that are out there. And there are so many myths and wives' tales around sex. I mean, around other things too, but then a lot of it's cultural messaging. A lot of it's like, patriarchal or religious messaging that is really not serving us anymore. And so part of what we want to do in Sex 101 is really give you the facts and the science so you can really free yourself from that, right? When we have more freedom, we have better sex, right? When we have more freedom, we have a better life. We have more enjoyment in our life. So, but I was laughing as I was researching. I love this topic about, right, men need sex. I get asked all the time, do men have a higher sex drive than women? Or, I made a post on TikTok. It was actually the first one that went viral, maybe a year and a half ago, about in my marriage, that I was typically the one with the higher sex drive wanting more sex. And I got so many comments of that never, by men being that never happens. It's only the man who wants more sex. And that's actually just not true. So we're going to get into some of that today, but, and research is really changing and showing us that. But I was laughing as I was researching this. I was reading this article written by a man, and he says, as far as sex goes, we men only have two questions. First question, now? Question mark. Second question, why not now? Question mark. And I was laughing so hard. That's not true, but it made me laugh out loud, right? And then he goes on to say, delaying sex when we have an erection and a willing woman, that is idiotic, right? So it's just made me laugh because it's this idea that, right, that men are always wanting to have sex. And actually there's a really interesting new book out that about not when men are not in the mood and how that is so much more common than we think. But, we were talking about in our earlier podcast about foreplay that a marker for arousal is on the outside of the man's body, the penis, right? So an erection, it's like you had said before, the wind can blow the right way, especially when you're younger, anything can cause an erection, even sitting on the school bus when you don't want it to be, when you're, maybe 12, 13 years old or something. And so, but it's much more complicated than just that. And men are actually much more similar to women than one might think. And one of the things I always say is we are all sexual beings. So, there are a small percentage of people that are asexual, but it's not very common. And the vast majority of us are sexual beings. We all came from sex. None of us would be here without sex. And one of the reasons we do this podcast, Toby, is to empower people to be fully and consciously and confidently in your sexual power, right? And that's consciously versus unconsciously, right? So, there's been a lot of interesting studies lately that have shown that men's and women's sexual desire are more similar than different. that it actually really varies individual to individual more than gender to gender, right? So even within men, there's a huge range. Within women, there's a huge range. Within non-binary persons, there's a huge range. And what's interesting is, as I was thinking about this podcast today, is like Maslow, right? The hierarchy of needs would say that it's a basic need. It's actually like the lower first tier need. So a physiological need for men and women. He didn't just say for men, right? It wasn't just for men, right? So sex, and I believe that. I believe sex is a basic need for men and women, but it's men and women alike. And so part of this is when we stop thinking about, and I hear as a sex coach working with so many couples, I hear all the time, right? It's a very common thing to say, well, my husband wants sex all the time and I don't. And it's like, we have to start to debunk that. We have to start to look at, how do we practice our sex drive? How do we increase our libido? How do we stay open to sexual intimacy with our partner and stop looking at it as like men versus women, right?
Yeah, you're right. That's the one. And leading some of the men's groups I've led, the when I talk to the fellas, they're saying, I do want sex. I'm not trying to have sex all the time, all nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I do really communicate, I'm wanting it. Sometimes if I hit her in the wrong mood or she's not in the right, if I catch her at the wrong time, rather, sometimes I still feel rejection, or then I just pull back and then I don't know. Right. So a lot of what we're talking about here today will obviously center around communication, but it's not that I don't think it's always that article that you read that you're right. That's just perpetuating some myth that isn't really true. The real truth is men want to have really amazing sex with the person they love. And things get weird and uncomfortable sometimes when we start talking about frequency, but that's something that you can communicate about.
Totally. And I love that, right? Like, I really believe that good men, which I believe are most men, really want to be amazing lovers. They really want to be, but we're not taught to be amazing lovers, right? Men nor women, right? And that's one of the reasons we're so passionate about this podcast, right? So, I really do believe there's a desire to be an incredible lover, right? There's a desire to be like for the studliness and the virility factor, but also because you want to bring pleasure to your woman, right? Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. And so, and I think men have, like, culturally, we have more favorable attitudes to sex around men than we do women. Yeah. I mean, that's just how it is. And it's Justin Garcia, who's the PhD, the executive director of the Kinsey Institute, that I absolutely love, at Indiana University. He says, people raised as men in our society have been typically given more permission to speak openly about wanting sex, while young women have often been told not to express their sexuality. So, right, that perpetuates this idea that's why we did the title, right? Men need sex. It's like, well, actually, humans need sex, people need sex, right? And so we're starting to debunk that, but also, like you said, Toby, have an understanding of how the male brain is wired differently in some ways than the female brain. That's not good, that's not bad, that's not better, that's not worse, that's just neuroanatomy, right? So when we start to understand that, and that's true, like on average, according to research, men have higher sex drive than women, but not much higher than you would think. But about a third of women, so 33% of women have higher sex drive than the average male, right? So it's way more common. And like I said, a lot of the research it varies more individual to individual than like men to woman, than male to female. So more true is this, this is sort of my thinking, as well as what research suggests, is that for men, sexual connection is often an important ingredient to feel powerful enough and safe enough to be vulnerable. And for women's brains and the female brain, it's often a little bit the opposite. Women would need to feel safe and connected to be able to feel a desire for sexual connection. Yeah. Right. And does that make sense? Does that resonate? Like, does that? Yeah. So. And so it's a different orientation. It's not like better or worse, or one's better. It's literally how the brain is wired, right? So if that, for all you women out there listening, if that is true, and I believe it is, that for men, sex is a way to connect that allows them to feel that, be open to emotional vulnerability. And for many women, that's what we're seeking, right? And this is not to say you have to have sex with your partner when you don't want to. That, to me, is a boundary violation. That is not what I teach or what I practice myself. But it's that understanding. It's deepening the understanding, right? Yeah. So for many men, sex begins in the body. So pleasure begins in the body. It might be an erection. It might be like, ooh, I'm feeling turn on. Oh, I felt something moving down there, right? It might be like, right. So sex begins in the body. Sexual turn on begins in the body. For many women, sexual turn on begins in the mind, right? But it's not, this is assumptions. This is broad strokes. This is not that case for everyone. And then men are more ready to have penetrative sex when they have an erection, right? There is a slower warm up of arousal for the female body than there is for the male body typically. Right?
Yeah.
So that's just anatomy of arousal. It doesn't mean, that we need to have penis MB or, whatever. But that men are more ready to have penetrative sex when they have an erection.
Yeah. And your penis, like you said, your penis is outside of you, and
Yes.
now it's hard. And so you're like, what do I know what I want to do with this thing? So your brain starts going,
Exactly.
oh wait, on a certain level, that guy said, if you're sitting there with an erection, you do think, but it isn't always that. Like, you can get erections and it doesn't necessarily. In fact, oftentimes when you have the erection, when you're, like our last episode talking about foreplay, if you foreplay, you probably will get an erection. But that doesn't mean immediately go to penis vagina intercourse.
Yeah, exactly.
Sex. You don't have to do
right.
that. And then
that's amazing,
yeah,
right? Men should know that too. Erection does not mean you have to like shove it inside the vagina, like
right.
Not to be crass, but like
yeah.
Right? Erection means like, wow, and there is exactly what you just said. It was thanks for bringing that to light. Like, there is genital non-concordance, meaning like you can have an erection and not feel aroused. You could feel aroused and not have an erection. The same goes for the woman's body, right?
Yeah.
So it's really about starting to get like familiar with what does turn on feel in your body. How do you keep the focus on pleasure and
right.
not on orgasm or erection? Those are things that will make you a better lover for all the men out there.
Yeah, you're right. The same goes, I'm assuming, with like women getting wet. That doesn't necessarily mean they are ready for you to enter them.
Right. It does not mean that same thing. A woman can be wet and not turned on. A woman can be turned on and not wet, right? The genitals do not always exactly sync up with turn on, with arousal. So that's important to know, right? And I think another thing that's really interesting is often for the male brain, sex might be how he's trying to show love and affection. It might not land for you as the woman out there. You might be like, dude, I'd rather him take out the trash. I would feel much more loving than like his boner in my face, right? Like, and that might be the case, it might not be. But if you know that for the male brain, that is often a way to try to show love and affection, right? And a lot of men, when they're polled about this or surveyed about this, will say like, hey, they really, just like you mentioned, they want to be great lovers. They want to turn their partner on. They want to help their partner to have an orgasm, right?
Yeah.
So it can be a sign of love and affection. And I think if females out there, and I am a female, if you know that about the male brain, this may be spot on for your male partner. This may not be spot on for your male partner, but that it might be a way of him showing the love and affection. It might also be a way for him to feel more open to being emotionally vulnerable, which might be something that you are desiring in that partnership, right?
Yeah.
So just an understanding, just for like the communication piece and the understanding is so huge. And right, the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, right? It's like, yes, I believe that the male brain and female brain are very different. I believe that men and women and the way we live in our culture are very different, right? But it's also like an understanding, right? So how do you start to bridge some of those differences and also realize where there isn't as many differences as we maybe thought that there was?
Yeah, you're right. I think too, even going back to what you were saying earlier, one of the things, you're right. Obviously people are different. And one of the things that kind of it's like dealing with like neurotypical or neurodivergent folks. You can those both can be superpowers, and both can be such amazing things. It's just you just have to figure out how to communicate with each other and navigate the differences, and then those differences oftentimes can become strengths in life and in sex.
Yeah, absolutely, right. I mean, and there's so many. And again, we're making some broad strokes because we have to jam out on this topic, right? So not every man is going to resonate with what we're saying, not every woman. So, and we say this in many episodes. So take what we say and use it and implement it in your life if it helps you, if it supports you, and leave it behind if it doesn't, if it doesn't resonate, if it isn't true for you, right? And sex can and hopefully is often love, right? Sex is a way of showing love, of feeling love. And many men report that when they're having sex with their partner whom they love, that they feel loved, right? So not only are they using sex as a gesture to show love and affection, a lot of men report it's how they feel loved, which is why you mentioned earlier about like with rejection and how that can be really challenging for men. Again, not saying that women need to have sex when they don't want to. That's a boundary violation, right? That's non-consensual. But knowing that for your man, that might really be received as a gesture of love. And so what I do when I'm working with couples is, let's say the woman's like, I don't want to have sex. And I'm like, well, then you shouldn't have sex. Like, right. That's just trauma. But so then how do you share that with your man in a way that is kind and that is loving, knowing that for them, it might be a way that they're feeling loved. So you don't want them to not feel loved. You just don't want to have sex. So how do you communicate that? Right. And maybe it's like, oh my gosh, you know what? I love that you want to have sex with me right now, but I'm just really feeling stressed out about tomorrow or whatever it is. Right. And I would love to just hold you or kiss you. Right. Or I would love to just lay here with you. Right. So you're rather than like, oh, I've got a headache. Right. Which we've all done. I mean, myself included, I don't do anymore because it's not honest, but that honest communication, but in a way that's kind and loving. Because also the interesting thing about who cares whose sex drive is higher in the moment, because it's not a static point. So maybe at times your sex drive is higher than your man's. Maybe at times your man's sex drive is higher than yours. Maybe your man's sex drive is always higher than yours, right? But the timing where you guys both sync up exactly the same is probably going to be few and far between. So then more important is how do you navigate it lovingly and stay connected and stay passionate with each other when your sex drives are at different points.
Yeah, totally. I know one thing I've learned in my life, and once again, I am not good at a lot of things. And so this is just something that I've been learning for me personally, is it is okay to get your feelings hurt. It doesn't feel good. It's not where you want to be. But what I like to expand on that thought is your feelings are going to get hurt. There's going to be times where your partner turns you down for sex and you really want sex, and there's almost no way you can stop your feelings from being hurt. Now, what I've learned about me is in that moment, recognize what does that mean and what am I truly feeling? Am I just like horny and I'm just like really just want sex, or am I feeling real rejection? Are my feelings hurt? Do I feel not attractive? Do I feel like my partner would have wanted somebody else and not me? Like they don't.
Absolutely.
And the more I think through those things, when my feelings are hurt, next time a little quicker, I go, wait a minute, I'm slipping into this feeling, but my partner isn't trying to hurt my feelings. My partner's just being honest. And the more you recognize those feelings, the hurt feelings, the more like allow yourself to sit in that for a minute and go, what, where is this really coming from? Why am I feeling rejected or hurt? And then you can way more quickly get to that the next time and the next time and the next time. You're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not being rejected. This is just the moment. And then you can find other opportunities to show each other love and affection.
That's amazing, right? So it's really a self-confrontation, what you're talking about, right? Self-reflection, self-confrontation, but doing so like lovingly, right? But getting curious why you're feeling something, right? It is, it's usually not personal, right? It's one of the 4 agreements. Like, don't take anything personal. It's hard to do when it comes to sexual rejection, and I experienced that a lot in my marriage. It was a pattern for me, and it was a painful pattern. And I had the story of like, oh, I'm the woman, I'm supposed to be the one doing the rejecting. And I'm like, that is just as screwed up. Like, let's not have that story either. Right. Yeah. So, but I love that, Toby, but like, why am I feeling rejected? Like, because then you get deeper, right? Maybe I am just wanting an orgasm. Like, it's just like my sleep button or something,
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm like, just like you mentioned, I'm feeling, I haven't really felt gestures of affection from my partner, and I'm feeling alone, or I'm feeling scared about the dynamic in our relationship, whatever it is. But that will give you so much of an opportunity to connect more deeply with your partner. And like you said, next time you might have a greater understanding. And I would also say you might bring that to your partner, not in that moment, not when you're feeling rejected or hurt, but you might say like, gosh, I've really noticed this pattern for us. And what comes up for me is I start to feel insecure that you don't love me anymore, or whatever it is for you. Right. And now you have an amazing opportunity. Your partner might be like, oh my gosh, holy shit. No, I actually legitimately had a headache. I don't want you to feel that way or whatever. Like, right. So you get an opportunity, and we talk about this in so many episodes, but you have an opportunity to either lean out and create distance or a chasm between the two of you, or you have an opportunity to lean in and create connection. And that really determines so much of the quality of a relationship if you can start to practice the leaning in, even when you don't want to.
Yeah, you're right. I think a lot of this too, obviously identify as a man. I think for me, one of the things I'm trying to recognize, once again, pretty bad at it, is when I have desire, and this goes out of the bedroom too. Like when I have the desire to have sex, that doesn't mean I have a pass to act on it. The same way as I have a desire not to sometimes look at my bank account because I spent a lot of money last weekend. I'm like, I'm not, no, but I need, there's certain things I need to do. You know, just because I have a desire to do something or not do something doesn't mean I have to act on it right now. And especially when you're talking about a partner and the person you love and the person you care about, you have to go slowly and go, wait a minute, this desire I have, whether it be sexual, whether it be, you know, I'm going to do something a certain way. When you're including somebody else, hear them out, see where they're at. And then I think oftentimes that'll reflect how you need to proceed.
Yeah, amazing, right? Your desires are totally welcome. They're totally beautiful. They're totally important. And you don't have to act on all your desires, right? Like you can understand them. I mean, that was so well said, right? And one of the things I love when I get to work with my male clients, and it's interesting, lately I've had a lot more male clients than female clients, just sort of interestingly. But one of the things we work on is that sexual power, that sexual sovereignty, right? How do you work with your own sexual energy and not have to engage it, but also not repress it?
Yeah.
Okay, how do you, like, sexual energy is the most, it's powerful. It's so powerful. It creates life, whether we use it that way or not. That's the power behind it. So learning to use your sexual energy, feel your sexual energy, not repress it, but also not have to orgasm, let's say, for example, right? So like using it, putting it into your work, putting it into your creativity, putting it into your parenting. And that's a lot of like more from the Tantra world, but we call it transmutation, but how do you transmutate sexual energy into just life energy? And it's really an amazing practice, right? And it's also makes the man or the woman, because we both practice this, more powerful, more sovereign. Like you get to feel all your desires, including your sexual ones, and be in sovereignty and autonomy of how and when and where you act on them.
Yeah, I love that. You're right. That's interesting. We should do an episode about that. That's like your sexual energy is so powerful. If you can let that infiltrate other parts of your life, it'll actually probably improve your entire life.
Totally. It's amazing. There's some beautiful practices. We'll do an episode on that.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Any last thoughts?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. So I think you're right. I think at a base level, needing sex is a form of connection because you can be so vulnerable. You know, this is how, you know, children are made. There's so much that goes into it. And I think oftentimes we forget that connection and that vulnerability and that real passion and love and care that we have for each other. Sometimes we let our life get in the way, or we just don't want to, or there's things, you know, past traumas. There's all kinds of things to navigate through. And so take your time, and it can get better. It can improve, and your man might need sex, but also he needs you and wants to love you. The relationship to be good. So, all right.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, you want to get to Stump Stormy?
Let's do it.
It's time to Stump Stormy.
Okay, I got. So I thought this was interesting. I was like, well, if men need sex, I think one of the things that men often think about is their penis size, which might end up in one of the listener questions too. So I found this. The second part of this is really the question I want to get to. But according to the Journal of Sexual Medicine, I want to asked 1,600 men to measure up. And because, you know, you're wondering, what do you think the smallest penis was in inches and the longest penis was in inches out of about 1,600, 1,700 men?
Somewhere around 3 inches shortest, probably a little under 3 inches, and longest, I'd say, we're talking the United States?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
That does actually matter, I think.
It does matter. Yeah. I'd say like just under 8.
Okay. 1.5 inches. 1.57 inches long, and then 10.23 inches long. Now, here's the real question I want to get to. Also in this study, they said, what made men have significantly larger members? Significantly in the same study, it said the men had significantly larger members than men who didn't do something else. So,
I don't know. I mean, I think of genetics and heritage as like the biggest factors that play into.
Well, this is something physical. I don't
know. Exercise.
Oral sex. It says in the same study, men who received oral sex before self-reporting their size had significantly larger members than men who measured after fantasizing or masturbating. What do you think about that one?
That is interesting.
What does that
I mean, I guess maybe what I think about it scientifically, the only thing I can think about, this is not for sure, is like when you're having oral sex, you're getting a lot of blood flow, like more than you are like with your hand, like in masturbation. So obviously the blood flow is going to engorge the penis. It's going to, right. That's why we have a different size between flaccid penis and erect penis. And what you mentioned earlier, like, right, there's different categories about micro penises, right. And then up to large penises. And so that's what would be my guess on that, would be that you're getting more blood flow because of more stimulation through oral sex than you would through your hand. But I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't know. That one's a weird one. Anyway, your penis is great, guys. Don't worry about it. You have one. Thank God you have one.
Exactly. Well, and we talked about this in so many other episodes of listener questions, because it's a common one. Is that what's interesting is research will show that your woman cares way less about your penis size than you do.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that goes on the other side too. I think guys are so much more turned on by their ladies, regardless of what their body looks like, or their vagina looks like, or their butt looks like, or their hip. I mean, I think guys are really turned on by their lady. Regardless, I think we all think about ourselves more than our partners are thinking about us. Okay. All right, let's get to listener questions.
Have a question? We've got answers. Here's this week's listener questions.
All right, and so I told you that one was coming. It says, what are the best comments to give a guy about their penis other than "it's huge"? I love my guy's penis, but it's not huge, and we both know it. So what else can I say? And this comes from Not Toby's Girlfriend.
That's awesome. So the best comments you can give your man, and by the way, I do really recommend for the hetero couple, well, for any couple out there, but give your man compliments about his penis. Men are very attached to their penises. That is not going to change.
You're right.
There's a joke. Why do men name their penises? Because they don't want a total stranger making all their important life decisions for them.
But
yeah, exactly. But it's a great joke because it's pretty true, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
What I would say is I would invite you to really lean into that. Give your man compliments about his penis, his cock. Use the term he used. So first of all, if you want to know, like, great, there isn't a perfect thing to say because it's going to depend on your man. So you know your man best. But definitely finding out what he calls his penis. Maybe it's penis. Maybe it's cock. Maybe it's Henry or whatever it is, like, right? So you can personalize the compliment, but it needs to be true. So like you were saying, you wouldn't want to say that, he has you have a huge cock or whatever. It wouldn't land for him, right? It's not so true, but then also with your full attention, like really, we've talked in other episodes about like devotion, adoration, like literally. So it might be something as simple as like, I love your cock, or your penis is so perfect, right? And don't add "for me" because that's not necessary. Your penis is so perfect, right?
Yeah.
It might be like, you are so gorgeous, including your cock, right? Like, so knowing what he calls his member, and then really what is true, right? Or I love the pleasure your penis gives me. I mean, right? So there isn't a perfect answer to this, but it's really about knowing your man, knowing what he calls his member, having it be true, giving it your full attention with adoration and devotion, knowing how important his penis is to him, right? And then also, I think showing your turn on with your touch, right? Showing how turned on you are, right? Like there's literally, you could give like a hand job, like while doing your grocery list in your mind. That is not going to be, a great hand job.
Right.
Or you can give it with like full, oh my God, I love your cock so much. Those are very, very different.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right. I think too, what would you like somebody to say? Like, would you like on the lady side? Would you just want your guy just to go, man, your boobs are so huge, like that? After a while, I mean, maybe, but that might not even be that of a turn on, or you might not even like that. You might be insecure about whatever it might be. So I think you're right. Like just being, I've never heard that before. That's interesting too. Like a guy naming his wiener and then like knowing that is kind of that's like a really intimate little thing between you guys that you might can have. So I think that's pretty cool.
Totally.
All right. This comes from More Sex Please. I have a really low sex drive and it's causing issues within my marriage. I want to have sex with my husband, but I never feel turned on or horny. Please help.
I love the question. So I will say you're not broken. There's so many things you can do to increase your sex drive. And I hear that you want to. So that's the most important thing. And really, like, sex drive is composed of of three parts, they say. So, right, it's your excitability to sexual stimuli, it's the frequency of sexual acts, and it's the frequency of sexual thoughts. So you might be struggling in one of those areas. Maybe you're struggling in all three of those areas, but get curious about that. You might be like, wow, I actually have a lot of sexual thoughts. I just not having a lot of sex, right? Or whatever it is. So no judgment. Okay, leave judgment at the door, but get curious about that. And then, we've done podcast episodes, so check those out about like sex drive. But look at things that are easy to look at, like, and not easy to change, but easy to look at. Like, stress is a huge pleasure and sex drive buster. So how's your stress? How's your sleep? How's your health and fitness, right? It doesn't have to mean you have to be like a Boston Marathon runner, but like, are you moving your body, right? Because we know that those are things that all help to increase our sex drive, right? And then, I absolutely always recommend talking to your physician about it, ruling out any medical reasons for low libido, for low sex drive, because there are many. So rule those out, like, get your testosterone checked, like, see what your hormone levels are, like all these things that you can do that also will make you feel empowered that you're doing something, you're taking action, which is huge to find and reignite your sex drive, because you are a sexy, beautiful, amazing woman who deserves to feel turned on by life and by your partner. And we all deserve that. So those, and then, another tip that I really like to do is, we just did an episode, so check out the episode on foreplay, because when you broaden your definition of foreplay, you're giving yourself more room, and you and your partner more room to feel turned on, to your, I don't know if I'm feeling turned on, to, yes, I'm feeling turned on. You're giving more space for that. So check out that episode, work on your foreplay. And then I think a really big part when I work, by the way, and this is a very common complaint, and I work with a lot of women who come to see me for coaching for this exact reason. And there's so much that can be done, about getting you back into your sexy, but that's part of it. What makes you feel sexy? Sexy is a terrible umbrella term that really doesn't mean anything, because it means so many different things, right? So what does it mean to you at this phase in your life, where you are currently when you're asking this question, right? What does sexy mean to you? And how do you cultivate that more for yourself, not for your partner, right? So when you start to feel more sexy, you will want to have sex more. Like, right, when you feel disconnected from your body, when you feel maybe it's trauma, maybe you just don't feel like, you feel numb, right? Psychologically, emotionally, or physiologically numb. That's okay. But there's so much you can do to integrate. So maybe it is trauma work with a therapist or something to integrate those traumas. But there's so much that you can do to reclaim your sexy and reclaim your pleasure. And not really outsourcing that. We tend to outsource sexy. Like, what does our partner think is sexy? I'm always like, literally don't even think about that. You can ask your partner what they think is sexy. That might be a helpful information. But what do you think is sexy? Yeah. What makes you feel sexy? What makes you feel like the vibrant, alive, beautiful, magnetic woman that you are?
Yeah, 100%. I think too, just even going off what you were saying, sometimes it is easier. Like even the last question, guys have been holding their penis since about the day they were born. It's just hanging off of you. That's how you go pee. And I think sometimes it is easier for a guy to connect with his body, because his penis is getting erect or whatever it might be. And sometimes it is harder for a lady to connect with her body, to connect with her vagina and go, oh, wait, I am turned, And so I think just like our last episode of foreplay, I think just taking your time and realizing, wait a minute, we might not be at the same speed here, or whatever is happening right now, we might not be exactly in tune. But I love this question, because what she's saying is, I do want to have sex. I wish I wasn't feeling like this. I wish I was turned on all the time, because I love my husband. And so you're at a good spot. You're at a good spot where you want to do this. You want to share this with your husband. So I think that's really beautiful. And it's just going to take some time, and you're going to fail. Like, you're not, it's not going to be fixed tonight. You're not just going to all of a sudden be super turned on. It's going to take some trial and error. And so take your time. Don't get frustrated, but because you're on the path to better sex already.
Right, exactly. And definitely for this listener and any other listeners out there, you can email me, stormy@lovedeeplab.com. It's lablab.com. And I will send you, we have part of our personal development series. We have a sex drive building guide, which has more tips than I just shared, and a meditation and a video, and then other resources in it as well. So shoot me an email, just put Sex Drive Guide in the subject, and I'll send you the Sex Drive Guide. It's interactive journaling. But just like you said, Toby, it's not, you don't just like arrive like, I now have this like crazy all the time 10 out of 10 sex drive, right? Sex drive is a practice. And I love that this listener has the courage and the excitement to put intention and attention onto building her sex drive.
Yeah. And be vocal with your husband. Tell him, I do want to have better sex with you. And it might take a while. And that alone will make him feel so good that he is wanted, that he is desired. Okay. Feel free, please, to send us any sex education topics that you want, anything that you want us to talk about here on the podcast, and also your listener questions. We sure would appreciate it. You can send it to Stormy@lovedeeplab.com or Toby@marriagesupply.com. Speaking of Marriage Supply, you get 10% off with code SEX101. I think we are a great adult toy store with no porn, very discreet shipping, and so I think you're going to love it. Also follow Dr. Stormy on Instagram at DocStormy1 or TikTok, which I love her TikTok, Touchy Subjects with 3 S's. And you can follow Marriage Supply on Instagram at the.marriage.supply. All right. Remember, folks, knowledge is power. Sex is power.
And the world needs a lot more of both.